Hi, I'm Mark Davies. In this video, I'll discuss ways in which you can use the corpora from EnglishCorpora.org, especially the now corpus, to look at recent linguistic, societal, and cultural changes in ways that are not possible with any other corpora. First, let's discuss other recent corpora and how they might be used to look at these changes. But spoiler alert, it turns out that there really aren't any other good options besides the corpora from EnglishCorpora.org. So if you want to just skip forward to what does work, go to the timestamp shown below this video. Okay, so in terms of what's available elsewhere, this website from Lancaster University advertises a summer school that deals with language, discourse, and society. And what corpora will they use? It looks like they will be teaching people how to download and create their own corpora from the web. In this video, we'll discuss how this can be done much more easily and much more quickly by using the tens of millions of texts at EnglishCorpora.org, including corpora that grow by millions of words and about 10,000 texts each day. Seriously, there's no need to spend hours downloading your own text from the web when there are much quicker and much easier options. It looks like at this summer school, they will also discuss how the B&C 2014 corpus can be used to look at recent changes. But to me at least, this doesn't make any sense. If that corpus doesn't have any text from 2015 to the current time, how can it possibly look at recent changes in language, culture, and society? Perhaps they will be comparing the 2014 data to the data from B&C 1994, which contains text from the late 1980s to the early 1990s, about 20 to 25 years before. But there's a serious problem with this approach. There are actually no texts for the 20 to 25 years between these two corpora. As a result, it's impossible to map out the contours of changes between the early 1990s and 2014. So there's no way to know if a linguistic or cultural or societal shift occurred in 1995 or 2000 or 2005 or 2010. In addition, you might miss a huge cultural shift completely. For example, in the 475 million word COA corpus of Historical American English from EnglishCorpora.org, the word hippie spikes in the 1960s and 1970s. Fortunately, in COA, we have about 30 million words of data in each decade during this period, including about 2.5 to 3.5 million words each year. But if you only had a corpus from 1960 and 1980, 20 years apart, like the two B&C corpora, then this word, which is so emblematic of the 1960s and 1970s, would be almost invisible. For more recent change, the COCA corpus, the corpus of contemporary American English, is even better than COA. At 1 billion words, COCA is about 5 times as big as the B&C, including both B&C 1994 and 2019. More importantly, it has at least 20 million words of data from each and every year between 1990 and 2019. And it has essentially the same genre balance each year. so you know that you're comparing apples to apples over time. Because COCA has data from each year between 1990 and 2019, when you do a search for a word or phrase, you can see the frequency by year, and you know just when the change occurred. For example, this is a search for Y2K. We see the frequency in 5-year groupings, and if we want, we can see the frequency by year as well. Here is the frequency for Al-Qaeda. And this is the frequency for Afghanistan. Of course, we already know when these events happened, and so the frequency data is no big surprise. But we see that the corpus data agrees very well with what we already know from other sources, and so we find that we can use COCA to look at changes where we might not already know what to expect. And what about collocates, nearby words, which allow us to look at changes in meaning and usage? The BNC doesn't allow collocate searches for the 2014 data, since links box X, which is the only way to access BNC 2014, can't do collocates. For example, this is from the manual for links box X. Notice that there's no discussion of collocates there. And this page explicitly mentions that all you can do with links box X is to look for a word and then see it in context. You can't do collocates. With COCA, on the other hand, you can see collocates over time, such as collocates of crisis. Notice collocates like health for healthcare, debt, energy, and refugee. And you can compare the collocates in different time periods, such as the collocates of web in the early 1990s compared to the 2010s. Notice that in the early 1990s, web isn't really used to refer to the internet. You have words like seamless and trap and strands, whereas in the 2010s, you have words like sites and search and engines, design, resources, and so on. In my view, the BNC 2014 corpus is kind of a non-starter as far as looking at recent changes. If you want to use a genre-balanced corpus and one that is 5 times as large as the BNC, and one that allows you to see changes year by year, and which allows collocate searches to see changes in meaning, then COCA is a much more useful corpus. Let's briefly consider one other possible source for Corpora for looking at recent change. Sketch Engine has a number of great corpora, and it also has an English trends corpus that is designed to look at recent changes in English. But actually, the corpus mainly just provides a list of words that have increased or decreased in frequency over time. It's really not easy to search for an individual word and then see the frequency of that word over time. So for example, here we're searching for Ukraine. and this is what we see for most searches in the English trans corpus. But sometimes we do get lucky, such as with ChatGPT. And so in this case, we can see the frequency by month. But there are many limitations. For example, you can't search for phrases. You can't see collocates over time. And the corpus is only about 1/4 the size of corpora like the Now corpus from EnglishCorpora.org. And it doesn't have text from nearly as long a time period as Now. It's a nice start, but unless you have some reason to limit your research just to Sketch Engine, you can probably do better elsewhere. EnglishCorpora.org has a number of corpora that provide recent data. These include the COA and COCA corpora, as we've already talked about, as well as the TV and movies corpora, both of which have extremely informal language up through the end of the 2010s. And there's also the coronavirus corpus, which contains 1.6 billion words from January 2020 to December 2022. But undoubtedly, the most powerful corpus is the Now corpus, News on the Web. In terms of size, searchability, and how recent its texts are, no other structured corpus anywhere comes close to Now. As of June 2023, when this video was made, the Now corpus has about 17.6 billion words of data in almost 30 million newspaper and magazine articles from 2010 to the current time. More importantly, it grows by about 2 to 2.5 billion words per year, or 180 to 200 million words each month, or 6 to 8 million words in about 10,000 texts each day. At the most basic level, you can use Now to look at the frequency of a word or phrase over the last 14 years, since 2010. For example, the word influencer has increased over time. Underclass has decreased over time. And the word selfie stick had a sudden increase in 2015. You can also look for the frequency of related words year by year, such as words starting with LGBT, or words that have Brexit somewhere in the word. And you can compare one period against another, such as words ending in ism that are more frequent in the last 3 or 4 years than 10 years before that. Not all entries are meaningful or useful, but there are new words like Trumpism, neo-fascism, wokeism, and doomerism. And with the Now corpus, you can drill down to find the frequency of a word or phrase, not just by year, but also by month. For example, in Google Trends, which measures what people are searching for, fidget spinner spiked in frequency in May 2017. In the Now corpus, which measures what was actually used in text, we see exactly this same spike in May 2017. And not only can we see the frequency by month, but also by day. For example, we can see that the phrase fake news first increased a lot in 2016. And drilling down, we can see that it really started to increase in November of 2016. And drilling down even more, we see that it increased suddenly right after November 8th, the date of the elections in the US in 2016. All of this allows us to tie current events to corpus data much, much more precisely than any other corpus ever could. And not only can Now show the frequency of words and phrases, it can also find and compare collocates over time to examine changes in meaning and usage and see what is being said about given topics over time. For example, we can see the collocates over time for brands like Adidas, which could be very useful for analysis of marketing. Or we can look at political or economic terms like Brexit and see how discourse on this topic has changed year by year and even month by month. Or perhaps technology, such as artificial intelligence, to see how what we're saying about this topic has changed over time. And we can easily compare the collocates of a word or phrase in two different time periods to see how our view of things has changed between these two periods. For example, we can search for nouns occurring after climate that are more common from 2020 to 2023 compared to 10 years before that. For example, notice the new terms like climate emergency, climate collapse, climate hell, climate warriors, or climate grief. There is lots of good information on climate change, and we can find it with just one simple search and 2 or 3 seconds. And again, no other small corpus of English like the B&C or any large corpus of English such as English Trends allows us to compare collocates like this for the very recent past. Finally, let's discuss one other feature that is perhaps the most useful and powerful feature of Now and the other corpora from EnglishCorpora.org to look at even very narrow topics for recent periods. In just 2 to 3 seconds, we can create virtual corpora composed of thousands of texts and even millions of words of text, again, even for incredibly narrow topics. For example, in just a few seconds, we can create a virtual corpus dealing with the HIMARS missile, which is a type of missile that is being used a lot in Ukraine. We enter the search term here, select text virtual, find text. It finds what it believes are the best texts for this particular topic, save it as the list HIMARS or any other name that we want. And there we have a virtual corpus of 100 texts, 153,000 words. And if we wanted this to be 10 or 100 times as large, we could do that as well. Or in just a few seconds more, we can create a virtual corpus dealing with ChatGPT. Again, enter ChatGPT here, text virtual, find text. These are the texts from among the 30 million texts in Now. We just enter a name such as ChatGPT. And now we have a virtual corpus with 100 texts, 211,000 words, and again, we could select many, many more texts if we wanted to. And then we can extract keywords from these virtual corpora. For example, nouns from the HIMARS corpus, or adjectives from the ChatGPT corpus. And of course, we can limit our searches just to a virtual corpus that we've created. For example, these are the nouns that are used before model in the entire 17.5 billion word Now corpus. But if we want, we can limit this just to the ChatGPT corpus that we've just created. And then the strings for noun model include language model, AI model, learning model, and so on. And of course, when we click on any of these to see the word or phrase in context, we are seeing just the entries from the virtual corpus that we've created. Why in the world would we need or want to spend a long time downloading text from the web to create a corpus on a particular topic, when with the Now corpus, we can easily create a virtual corpus on this topic in just a few seconds by searching through tens of millions of texts, including thousands of articles from as recent as yesterday. It makes no sense at all to simply ignore such a powerful resource. And it's worth mentioning that at this point, among serious researchers at least, Now has become the de facto corpus for anyone looking at recent linguistic, societal, and cultural change. It's amazing to see the wide range of fields in which Now is used and where data from Now has been crucial for a wide range of research in fields such as diverse as politics, economic, business and marketing, technology, gender studies, environmental studies, legal analysis, and much, much more. Again, there really is no need to spend hours or days downloading your own text to look at recent linguistic, societal, and cultural changes. Now already has tens of millions of texts, including about 10,000 new texts each day. And you can search through these and even create virtual corpora for very specific topics in just 2 or 3 seconds. If you're still doing things the old-fashioned way, the corpora from EnglishCorpora.org, especially Now, will transform the way you do research.